Hey guys, welcome to Movie Talk Webcast, episode 2. I am your host Brandon, along with Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian. This is the Ghost episode 2.
And Darius is not here with us this week, but we'll be back next week.
We miss you, Darius.
What was it?
I said we missed Darius.
The show, we're basically a couple buddies from USF talk about anything and everything that we've watched over the last week and any movie news that we've found interesting.
Yeah, this show is going to change on a weekly basis. It's really just going to be whatever we feel like talking about.
Movie news. Start with that first. Do you have anything before I get into? Because I'm really excited about what happened.
Yeah, Oscar nominations came out this week. That was a really huge deal. Yeah, in addition to that, you had the Critics' Choice Awards, the Golden Globes. People are starting to narrow down who's going to win all the categories this year. Like we have a pretty clear idea who the front runners are. So, just out of the major categories, Spotlight is the clear front runner for Best Picture. George Miller is the front runner to win Director for Mad Max: Fury Road, which I just think it's awesome that a movie like that could win Best Director because it totally deserved it, but that's not normally something you see the Academy recognize even when it's really good. I mean, Dark Knight didn't even get nominated for Best Picture, so Mad Max Fury Road winning Director would be a huge deal. All of you people who love internet memes will be happy to know you will not have to read the DiCaprio ones anymore. He's going to get his Oscar this year for The Revenant. And young actress Brie Larson is the front runner to win for Best Actress for her film Room. Now there's a slight chance that she'll lose that, but it doesn't look like it's hers to lose at this point. So couple notable things about the Oscars. For the second year in a row, we had in both the actor and actress categories, all of the nominees were white. People are not happy about that. It's trending on Twitter, which honestly, I kind of agree with the criticism. I mean, I think that everybody who did get nominated this year deserved a nomination, but it is really ridiculous. We had a lot of great performances by actors and actresses of color this year, so to see them not represented in the categories, I completely understand why people are upset by that. I mean, not that it really matters. None of them are going to win anyways. Brie Larson and Leo DiCaprio pretty much have those two categories locked up. So,
I was listening to a podcast, the one that I listen to every week, and they were joking about how they never want Leo to win at this point, just because it's funny that he's come this long and he's the guy that never won. And they were saying how it would be funny if they made a movie about him never winning the Oscar for Best Picture, and then the guy who plays him gets Best Picture.
Well, my favorite one was that I saw a meme where they showed the scene from The Revenant where he's fighting the bear, and it goes, and the Oscar goes to, and then it shows a bear holding an Oscar.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
One was, well, I never quite understood the amount of how upset people get about Leo not winning an Oscar. Not to say that he doesn't deserve one. He certainly does. But being an Oscar nerd myself, every single year that he got nominated, quite frankly, it was either the kind of performance that wasn't going to win or there was someone else in the category who was clearly going to win that year no matter who they were up against. And the reason that I know he's going to win this year is because he finally turned in the sort of performance that the Oscars want. It's a very Oscar baity performance. It's very physical. There's not a lot of dialogue. The backstory of all the stuff that he had to do for this movie is just insane. There's a reason he's going to win for The Revenant and he never won for anything else. It's because, quite frankly, he didn't turn in the kind of performance that Oscar voters like. So, also, I'm a little upset he's going to win against Michael Fassbender this year for Steve Jobs, because I would actually put Michael Fassbender above Leonardo DiCaprio as someone who has been unjustly ignored by the Oscars, because at least Leo got nominated for all of the years that he should have won. A lot of the years, Michael Fassbender didn't even get nominated for the performances. The movie Shame, he didn't even get nominated for that, and all of the critics were like, how do you not even nominate him for this? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. I think Leo will win his first Oscar. What he did to prepare for this movie just go on the internet and just read up what he did. It is incredible.
Yeah, we'll go over it more when we talk about the film, but just the guy almost died like 5 times making this movie. I don't know, and it all shows on the screen. I don't know how you don't give it to him. I mean, it's a textbook example of a Oscar performance. Like the analogy I always give people was last year. Last year you had two very strong competitors, which we're seeing the same pattern this year. You had Michael Keaton for Birdman. That was a very personal, very dialogue-driven performance. And then you had Eddie Redmayne, who was playing Stephen Hawking, who it was one of the definitive performances of a disabled person that I've ever seen. So it's like, what do? Do you give it to the super Oscar baity performance, or do you give it to the performance that is very personal, that is something new, and that is maybe better on a different end of the technical spectrum? And they gave it to Eddie Redmayne because he played a disabled guy who was a famous scientist. I mean, that's when it's a hard decision, the Oscars always go with what is the Oscar baity performance, which is.
But in the same spectrum, we did have the best performance by a bear in The Revenant.
Oh yes, not just a bear, a CGI bear. We have not seen a CGI bear.
I don't think it was CGI.
Oh, it was CGI.
I think parts of it were, but I'm almost positive that they used a real bear. Not obviously not to attack, but in certain sequences, I think it was a real bear.
Okay, that may be true.
I'll double check it.
Yeah.
But I'm almost positive.
Okay, they might have used a real bear for some of the sequences, and then during the attack sequences, they used the CGI.
I know it was probably more for when he wasn't attacking, I would assume. I mean, that's just common sense. But they didn't want him to roar, because to get a bear to roar, you have to get it angry. And for obvious reasons, you don't want that. So I think when Leo's looking at the bear from a distance, that's the real thing.
So when the bear comes in, and whenever it's far away, it's real.
When
bear.
He's running,
whenever it's real close to him. Okay.
That's real.
Yeah, I buy that. That sounds right.
All right, but look, I want to talk about that when we talk about.
I do want to say though, I saw a really good joke on the internet about the white Hollywood thing with the Oscars, where they were saying the reason the bear didn't get nominated was because it was a brown bear. If it was a polar bear, it would have gotten nominated. I thought that was pretty good.
All right, so that's your bit of news, and I cannot wait to talk about this because I have waited 8 years or so for a new Cloverfield movie. Did you see this?
I saw that.
You saw the first one?
Yes.
Did you like the first one?
Oh, I'm a huge J.J. Abrams fan. I actually think Cloverfield is a very underrated movie.
Did he work on the first one?
Yeah, that was him. He directed it and wrote it.
I looked on IMDb and I didn't see his name credited to that because I know he's producing this one. He's not directing. He's producing.
He directed and wrote Cloverfield. Cloverfield and Super 8 were his attempts to do like sci-fi movies. In between in that period in between when he had just left Lost and before he had rebooted Star Trek.
And it only makes sense that we're only hearing about this now because it's J.J. Abrams and the way he kept all the secrets hidden from the first one. We're only finding out about this movie now, and it's not, hey, here's the trailer. Now you have to wait till next October to see it.
It's done.
It's coming in 2 months. In less than 60 days, we'll have 10 Cloverfield Lane, which I'm kind of curious to see how they connect it to because it's not a direct sequel. He said it's a blood relative and that it takes place in the same universe.
From what I've seen, it looks like it's going to be they're all in a bunker and it's going to be a small. It's going to be a small. Most of the drama is going to revolve around the bunker and the question of whether or not they should get out of it, which at
some point they will, because otherwise they'll be in the bunker the whole time.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but John Goodman's in that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very excited
IMDb
about that.
Credits Matt Reeves with the directing and Drew Goddard as the writer. Is that true? I don't know. That's what confused me is.
I know it's a JJ movie. Maybe he's not as involved as I said he was, but I know that was very much a JJ Abrams movie. Now, he may not have been the technical director, he may not have been the technical writer, but I know for a fact that was very much a JJ Abrams movie. Now, whether or not he came in later and they had this movie and got it made and came up with the whole marketing strategy that made it as popular as it was.
I'm thinking I really want to hold off on talking about this because I think that this should be a movie that we cover the week the new one comes out, because I'm going to see the new one.
Yeah,
and I want to I'll rewatch this, and I will have Darius watch it too. I don't know if you've seen it.
We'll go see it. I want to go see that.
I want to talk about the first one because there's so much I love about it that everybody hates, and I really just want to get it out there.
I agree with you. I'm a very avid defender of that movie. I know this is a very pretentious thing to say, but I think the reason a lot of people hated it was because they didn't really get what it was trying to do. Like a lot of the criticisms of that movie, I think, are actually its strong points.
It was a lot of, it just made me motion sickness seeing the camera. No, the whole point was to get their view, but I'm going to shut up because I have so much time on this.
I have so many things to say about it.
I just wanted to bring up that over the weekend I saw the trailer for it, and I was so excited about it.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the first one up in New York with my cousin like 2 or 3 times. And I texted him. I said, "Dude, there's a new one coming out." He goes, I know." And I said, if I wasn't so poor, I would fly up and just to see that movie with you to relive the magic of the first one.
I saw that movie, and quite frankly, it blew me away. Plus, it had a young T.J. Miller in there when he does it before he cursed all the time, which was entertaining to watch.
I loved it. Anyway, speaking of T.J. Miller, I can't wait to see Deadpool.
Deadpool.
Did you see? They did a surprise screening and everybody loves it.
Well, it's I believe they're using the original script that Ryan Reynolds wrote. So this is the movie that he's been like. They didn't change it. This is the version of the movie that he's been trying to make for like 7 years.
You said Daredevil, and I got me thinking Daredevil. No, Deadpool. This is the Deadpool that he wanted to play and he should play.
Well, and the second that I heard that it was going to be rated R, I was like, yes. Because I think we can all agree Ryan Reynolds is the perfect person to play Deadpool. And I'm a huge fan of the Deadpool comics. It does have this weird comic sensibility to it that is very much what he's done for a good portion of his career. Once I heard T.J. Miller was in it, that was it for me. I was like, okay, T.J. Miller is he's playing Weasel. That's awesome. Yeah. He's perfect. They've got Colossus in it. It's got the ties to the X-Men and the mutants, and they're going to have Copycat in it. A lot of, like, characters. I like that they're putting Colossus in it because he was always one of those characters I didn't feel they did justice in the X-Men movies because Colossus is a really cool character.
And speaking of Ryan Reynolds, we'll talk more about Deadpool when that comes up because I cannot wait.
I'm seeing that first week.
So anyway, speaking of Ryan Reynolds, let's move on to some movie reviews now.
Yeah.
And talk about what we've seen in the last week. And I saw Buried. Did you ever see that one?
I did not see it, but that was based off of friends' recommendations.
What do you mean?
I had a lot of people go see that, and they were like, "Don't waste your time."
Yeah. My wife liked it. She enjoyed it, and she's the one that told me about it. And I signed up for Netflix, and he goes, "Let's get Buried." I said, "You know what? We're already getting the service. Why not?" And one, it really does make you feel claustrophobic. For anyone that doesn't know the movie, the entire 90 minutes of the movie is about Ryan Reynolds being buried alive in Afghanistan. He's taken hostage and buried and held for ransom, basically. And the entire movie is shot within the confines of a coffin, and the only actor you see the whole movie is Ryan Reynolds. Now you hear other actors and voices on the phones that he's talking to, but the entire movie is just Ryan Reynolds in the coffin. And I thought that was kind of a cool concept. It did make for very slow moments, as you can imagine, especially the moments where you're just kind of laying there not talking and not doing anything.
Well, but that's not necessarily an excuse. I'm going to bring up 127 hours. James Franco has his foot trapped in a rock in a gully for 2 hours. That movie is riveting. Like, if you ever want to see an example of a film on how to not have your character move for 2 hours and still make a very interesting movie, like, I would go watch that right now. Yeah. So that concept can be done. It's just very hard.
And I hate saying that, this movie was so unrealistic, because every movie is unrealistic. In some way, shape, or form, there's some part about a movie that would never happen in real life. But the thing that bothered me the most about this movie was that I think it took place in like 2008. We'll just say that. Mm. So 8 years ago, on a BlackBerry, he had better phone service on his BlackBerry 3 feet under the ground in Iraq than most iPhones do today.
Well, you didn't hear about that back in 2008. The Taliban was making a big push for cell reception. Their cell reception was.
But he was
That's where all the
calling.
money
He was
was going.
yeah, but he was calling back to the U.S. with ease, like, and the internet speed of him uploading his videos of his ransom videos. It just happened almost instantly, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" Like they tried to like have his cell phone, his calls go dead because of no service, which would make sense. But then 30 seconds later, the call pick right back up, or he would call back, and then he would go on a 20-minute conversation with no interruption, and it just annoyed me. I was like, "There's
That is
no
the
way."
big complaint that all of my friends told me about the movie. Like, I had one friend say to me, like, whoever wrote this script clearly does not understand how cell reception works.
Exactly. And the fact that he was doing it from 3 feet
Well,
under the ground.
if your
was
whole
just,
premise hinges on him using a cell phone, you should probably put him in a situation where he can realistically use it.
exactly. So that's my quick review on it. I wouldn't really recommend it unless it came free to you, and then even then, I would watch it, but don't get too excited about it.
So if somebody happens to just throw this movie at you on the street and it's yours now, watch it. But even then, you probably won't like it that much.
I know my wife will disagree and hate me for bashing that movie, but what are you gonna do?
All right. You see anything else good this week? Or
I wouldn't
anything
say
else
good.
not good? Did you just
Yeah, I
see
guess
anything?
you know what
I'm gonna say is I have a wife, so I watch a lot of chick flicks, and for the first time
I'm
ever,
so
I watched How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Surprisingly, I enjoyed it, and it was pretty funny. There were a lot of times where I actually laughed, but just like any chick flick romance movie, it was extremely predictable, and that just kind of took the enjoyment out of it for me. But if you have a girl to watch it with, go ahead and throw it on. Other
So
than
what
that,
you're saying is there's a lot of chick flicks that girls will make guys watch that are just absolutely a pain in the ass to sit through, and this is not one of them. This is the one
No,
that
this one-
you could actually kind of enjoy.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, but it's not one that I would throw on and watch by myself.
No, obviously, but you're saying there's a lot worse ones that,
Yeah.
like really anything with Katherine Heigl that isn't knocked up.
That wasn't Katherine Heigl. That was
No, that's what I'm
Kate
saying. Anything with Katherine Heigl that isn't knocked up is horrible to sit through. I've tried to watch a few of hers at current girlfriend's behest. I will say, The Ugly Truth is one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my life. If I hadn't gotten into the screening for free, I would have asked for my money back. Literally the only reason me and my friend saw that was because our friend was like, hey, I got a bunch of free tickets to this. Do you want to go see a movie? And we're like, hey, we're broke, sure.
So, aside from those two movies and then our number 4 picks, that's all I saw this past week. What about you?
Well, once the Oscar noms came out and it became clear that Spotlight was the front runner, I decided I kind of have to see this. I have a list of ones. I intend to watch all 8, but Spotlight was the first one that I watched because it's the front runner. I was happy with it. I'm going to reserve, like I always do, I always make a point of not making any judgments about the Best Picture winner or front runner until I've seen all of the movies. I've seen 4 of the 8, so I'm going to, hopefully by the end of the week, I will have seen all 8. I would be okay with Spotlight winning. I'm not going to make any comparisons on whether or not The Revenant or The Spotlight deserves to win because they're drastically different kinds of movies. I think that comes down to your personal sensibilities. Like, me personally, I would be okay with either of those winning. Spotlight, I thought it was a very good movie. It didn't really strike me as a Best Picture, though.
I disagree. And
Yeah.
I love The Revenant, and it might win, and it deserves to win if it does. I just think Spotlight had more of an impact with the story.
Well, if you had to ask my opinion, I would say give Best Picture to Spotlight if it was just between those two movies because it's more socially relevant. I feel that it's talking about a very important issue, which again is why I think it's the front runner.
And so does The Big Short. The Big Short was another movie where it exposed a huge scandal
I
within some
need
big
to see
organization.
that. I'm very excited about that because I know Adam McKay, the guy who's most famous for directing every Will Ferrell movie ever, actually turned in a really good, like, dramatic movie. So I'm very interested to see that. I actually like Adam McKay. I think he's a great comedy director, which a lot of times people will not look at you as seriously if you're a comedy director, but in a lot of ways, comedies are harder to direct than dramas. So I really want to see The Big Short. I'm less excited, but we'll see Room and Carol. I've heard really good things about Brooklyn, so I need to see that. The ones that I have seen, I've seen The Revenant, Spotlight, Mad Max, and The Martian. Actually, if you wanted my opinion right now, based off of what I've already seen, I know there's no chance in hell they will ever give this Best Picture. Give it to Mad Max. Please give it to Mad Max for the scene alone where there is a guy riding on the back of a truck playing death metal with a wall of speakers and fire shooting behind him. That movie is everything it's like, what if someone did a really hard R-rated action movie, but everything about it was done with complete technical precision. I mean, the movie's a 2-hour car chase. Just the logistics alone of doing that are just baffling.
Yeah, I've seen The Revenant, Spotlight, The Martian, and The Big Short. And The Big Short, I liked that they took such a serious issue and was able to make it funny, enjoyable, and get you really pissed off all at the same time. And when you watch it, you'll understand.
From what I've heard, I think that's going to end up being the one that I enjoy the most.
Yeah.
Especially because I really like the cast. I like that. I mean, Christian Bale's amazing, and I like that Steve Carell is moving into the dramatic portion of his career. I really liked him in Foxcatcher. I thought that he was amazing in that movie. It was a shame that was such a competitive year because I think Carell definitely turned in an Oscar-worthy performance with Foxcatcher, but it's besides the point.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch all 8 this year. I did last year, except last year I want to say American Sniper was the only one that I saw in the theaters. The other 7 I watched in the 24 hours leading up to the Oscars, and I definitely don't want to do that again.
Last year was a weird example where by the time the Oscars happened, I think that American Sniper was the only one of the nominees that was still in the theaters. Yeah. I think by that point, all of those movies had already come out on DVD, so you could do that last year. You can't really do that this year unless not saying anybody in this room has done this, but if you happen to have access to file sharing programs, I heard from a buddy that all of the Oscar screeners leaked, but I wouldn't know anything about that myself.
I'm pretty sure that's true. Anyway, we got to move on because, like last week, we are running low on time because of class. We really have to find a better time to do this, so we're not rushing this. Okay. So we talked about Spotlight, Buried, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, and now to our new movie review, The Revenant, which I went and saw on Monday with my dad, brother-in-law, and we all really enjoyed it. And I knew it was going to be a long movie, but it kept you intrigued the entire way. It didn't start off slow. I like that. I like if it's a 2.5 hour movie. I like when it starts off with a bang and then it starts off with a lot of action. And that's what it did with that war scene between them and the Native Americans.
The director, the guy who did Birdman, which I'm not going to even try and pronounce his name. I think we both agreed on that. It's Alexander and then a bunch of consonants. Inaratu, something like that. Brilliant director. I love all of his films. He did one of my favorite ones, Mueros Fueros, Love is a Bitch, translated loosely. He did 21 Grams. He did Babel, and he did Birdman. This guy is an auteur. He's obviously one of the greatest living directors we have right now. I think it was a really smart decision. He realized that this was a story that he was going to have to do very slow and gradually and with a very grating tone in order to tell the story correctly. So how do you do that and you keep people interested? Gorgeous cinematography.
I think that, without a doubt, that wins. I don't think I've seen the other ones, but I think that wins.
Oh, he's got the guy, the cinematographer has a lock on it. He won last year for Birdman, and everybody's like saying,
which makes sense because I noticed in this movie how many long shots there were, and you would go 45 minutes to a minute or even longer of one continuous shot. And then I realized and I remembered that it's the same cinematographer from Birdman, which
Birdman famously,
even though it was trick photography, it was all done.
Birdman famously, Birdman is a case of spot the editing cuts because you really can't. I watched the movie and I think there's maybe 2 instances where I can see where they cut it and so he won last year for that because the just editing magic that he pulled there. But
goes with the Revenant too.
Yeah, The Revenant is just, quite frankly, one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. This is going to be shown in film classes for the next 50 years. Like, if for nothing else, people will always remember this movie because it is just simply breathtaking. And the fact that it's sort of in like the wilderness in Canada, which is not in the snow, which is not necessarily something that you see a lot of, attention to cinematography in this sort of setting, does make it stand out. Like if he had done this in more familiar settings like the West or in the jungle or in the desert, we've already seen that movie a couple of times. I haven't really seen somebody do this kind of landscape shooting in the snow. So it looks very good.
There was a lot of backlash from everybody that worked on set on this movie because of the working conditions that they were in. Because we'll just say the director, because I'm not going to pronounce the name of it, but the director, he went to great lengths to get the perfect shot without using any effects of any kind. And
famously, he only used natural light in this movie.
Exactly.
So there would be times where they'd be sitting out in 0-degree weather for 6 hours waiting for the clouds to move so that they could begin shooting again. I mean, both Tom Hardy and DiCaprio,
the lengths they went to get this movie looking the way it did is incredible.
DiCaprio said that this is the hardest movie he's ever filmed, and he's worked with Martin Scorsese 5 times. Like, I find that very hard to believe. But, he did go the naturalistic approach, which everything about this movie, you hear all the crazy stuff that they said, and you think, oh, maybe they didn't have to do that. Yes, they did. All of this crazy, realistic naturalism stuff, you can see it on the screen. So this wasn't just the director was being nitpicky. It does add to the film, and that's why it looks so good.
Yeah. And speaking to how good this film looked, we got to talk about this quickly because we're running out of time. The bear scene. Without a doubt. And I love that it was in the beginning of the movie. And I know that the whole premise was his survival after that scene because he is left for dead.
Actually,
and how he survives the rest of the movie.
You know why it's called The Revenant?
The Revenant is somebody that comes back from the dead.
Yeah, the one return.
And that scene was incredible. There was no lack of gore, which I loved. And it wasn't one of those attack scenes where you see him get mauled by a bear and then they go back to him and then you see the after effects of what happened. No, when that bear digs his claw into his back, you see his skin get ripped apart. Like you see it. It's not a cutaway scene and then comes back and then they did all the makeup and then they showed the after effects. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you think that there's the level and attention to detail that they put into these long shots of the landscapes was not put into the bear attack. This was not like a Fast and the Furious Transformers.
I want to say the bear attacked 3 times. I want to say each attack was one continuous shot. If I remember correctly, I want to say it was one continuous shot for each time
I was impressed because when the bear was, as we established, when the bear was striking him, that was definitely a CGI creature. So Leo looks like he's getting mauled to death, and that's even more impressive considering he's probably doing it to nothing. Like a guy holding up like a little puppet thing and being like, okay, he's scratching you.
I can't wait for this movie to come out on Blu-ray just so I can watch the special features and how they made that scene work.
Yeah, because Leo really does look like he's in pain, which is impressive considering he's probably acting to nothing. Somebody's probably holding up a little pillow and being like, "This is its claws. Act like you're hurt."
I also can't wait to watch the Blu-ray when it comes out on DVD or Blu-ray, just even rent it. My one issue with it was the dialogue and just how they mumbled a lot of the movie.
Mm.
Me personally, I had a very hard time understanding what they were saying a lot of times. My brother didn't. He's like, that was ironically like one of the few movies that I caught everything that they were saying clearly. But that's just me. So when I watch it, I want to watch it with the subtitles.
I know a lot of people did. I didn't have an issue with that.
Yeah.
That just wasn't. But then again, that's something that doesn't usually bother me.
And I know that when you're in that kind of environment, you're not eating properly. You're not eating all the time. It's negative degrees outside. However cold it is, nobody's going to speak clearly, which I get. I just had a hard time understanding with it.
I thought the mumbling was characterization. I thought the mumbling was.
I'm not bashing the mumbling. I think the way they spoke was really how they did it back then. I just had a hard time understanding, which that's just me personally.
And can we talk about Tom Hardy for a second? I know we're short on time, but everybody's talking about Leo. I didn't realize that was Tom Hardy until 30 minutes into the movie. Like
the only reason I knew it was him was because I knew he was in the movie and I knew who he played. Other than that, he's really unrecognizable. Even Leo is unrecognizable at some points.
At some points. I would say, though, that I'm not going to say that Tom Hardy was better than Leo in that movie because that's not true. I liked Tom Hardy's performance more because I really saw him doing something that it was a transformative. I always like ones where I don't recognize the person. So I really liked Tom Hardy in that movie. I think it's a shame that Sylvester Stallone's going to win for playing Rocky the 11th time over Tom Hardy because I think Tom Hardy really deserved it this year. But, whatever. We got to give Rocky his Oscar because it's the 11th time he's done him. We'll get into that later. I don't like Sylvester Stallone.
Obviously. All right. So we'll take a quick break here because we have to switch rooms because we're running low on time.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take a quick break and then we'll come back in another room and we'll talk about our number 4 picks. Hey everyone, welcome back to Movie Talk Webcast. We did have to take a break because we ran out of time and we were going to take a small break and finish up, but I ended up just going to class instead. So we took about a 2-hour break, and in that time, in my class, I was bored to tears. So I was surfing the web and I noticed that they released the trailer for the Suicide Squad movie.
Yeah, they just released the second trailer. I haven't seen it yet, but I heard that they were about to release it because they released a bunch of the official posters the other day. I don't know about you. Are you actually excited about Suicide Squad, or is it just
Very excited? Even after watching this, even watching the first trailer and then now the second one, you get a little more information as to what's going down and how they all come together. I'm really excited about it.
Well, I like the original source material a lot. I know that they're trying to create the DC universe. I think it's very smart to try and introduce the Joker in something like the Suicide Squad movie, because let's be real, that's the whole reason this movie got greenlit. We need to introduce the new Joker of the DC universe. Now, I know a lot of people are getting superhero fatigue because it seems like a new movie's coming out every other week. I'm actually excited about Suicide Squad because I like David Ayer, the director. I think he's really good. And I think this is going to be the kind of superhero movie that we haven't seen before because it's not a superhero movie. It's a bunch of. It's a
super villain movie.
Yeah, it's a bunch of supervillains. If you don't know the plot, it's about a bunch of supervillains who basically are told, you're on death row or you're in prison. You can go on this suicide mission, and if you survive it, we'll let you out. Yeah.
I'm worried about Jared Leto's Joker. And I think a big part of that is because he's got to follow in the footsteps of Heath Ledger, who played the greatest villain in any movie.
Well, let's be fair, though. A lot of people said the same thing about Heath Ledger when they were comparing him to Jack Nicholson. the reason Heath Ledger's Joker was so good, which we'll talk about this later when we talk about The Dark Knight, was because he reinterpreted the character. I think that if Jared Leto, fortunately the Joker is a character that has had so many different versions that they could reinterpret the character. So it's going to come down to, does Leto do the Joker in a way that no one's done before? Because then it doesn't have to be better than Heath Ledger's, it's just different.
Which, this is a perfect segue into our top movies of all time list.
Yeah.
Because my number 4 movie of all time is The Dark Knight.
And I think we both agreed this is a very popular movie. We're going to try and stay away from the things that everybody talks about. Like, yes, this movie has a great script. Yes, the Joker was amazing. Yes, it like revolutionized superheroes and movies and made them all serious now. Like, we're going to try and stick to stuff that maybe people don't talk about as much that are still very good components of this film.
Now, you say we're going to try and steer away from all that common talk about the movie. The only thing I want to say is that I feel that Heath Ledger could be nominated year after year for Best Supporting Actor for that role and win every year. I think that's how good he was.
Well, and going more into that, I mean, a lot of people said that the only reason he won the Oscar was because he died, and that was a component to it. But that was a very if you had said 10 years ago someone's going to win an Oscar for playing the Joker, they would have laughed at you. That's ridiculous. Like, that is not the kind of role that the Oscar gives awards to. And Heath Ledger took what could have just been a silly little villain, like he's a clown, and turned it into probably the definitive villain of our time.
He took method acting to a whole new level too. Offset, he was the Joker, and people were terrified of him when they were not filming because he stayed in character.
Well, and before that, he spent 2 months locked in a hotel room by himself, keeping a journal to get himself in the mindset. Like, a lot of people wonder, like, oh, why did he die after that? Like, he was not in a good place when he was doing that role. He really got into the mindset.
Yeah, he was so good in it. So let's move away from that because I think that's a very...
I think the thing we were talking about earlier that not enough people focus on is how good the practical effects are in that movie and how little Christopher Nolan had to use CGI.
Perfect way to say it. Yeah. I'm going to cut this short because I can talk about this for another hour. I watched the special features on that Blu-ray from start to finish, all 2.5 to 3 hours of it. There were 3 scenes that really stuck out to me.
Okay.
The first was... Actually, the first 2 are kind of the same scene. It just takes part in a different place of the scene. And it's the car chase scene when they're under... I wouldn't say a tunnel.
The bike chase scene where
it's before the bike. Before the bike comes out and they're in the tunnel.
Oh, so it's
and the Joker comes out.
It's when it's the bat. It's when it's the bat pod whatever you call the Batmobile. The Tumbler. It's the Tumbler before the motorcycle comes out.
Yes, and they're in the tunnel with the Joker and all his men in the semi truck, and then the garbage truck comes into play. Do you know anything about how they did all that? I assume you did.
I do. They did it all.
It was entirely done with remote control cars.
Yeah,
they built like impressive. 1 30-second scale models of the cars, the trucks, the roadway, and they filmed it using remote controls. And I thought that was awesome.
Well, and talking about the bat pod scene, probably one of the great memories I have of ever being in a movie theater is the scene where the bat pod comes out of the tumbler and turns into the motorcycle. Everybody in the theater went crazy. Everybody applauded, stood on their feet. There's very few movies that I've been in a theater for where I've seen a reaction
and that wasn't
like
an effect either. They made the vehicle
pod, yeah. It was
so they can do that. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So my second upside, I don't really know how to say it.
Your second action sequence.
Yes. I just lost my train of thought there.
I got you.
Takes place later on that scene with the truck, and the truck flips over.
And the way they actually flipped the truck.
Yes, that is not in fact. That was a real truck. really flipping over in the real streets of Pittsburgh. If that's where I know they filmed the Dark Knight Rises in Pittsburgh. I'm not sure about the Dark Knight.
I think it
If
was
that was
portions of it. It
In
may not have
Pittsburgh,
been.
so
It
New
may not
York,
have
I
been the
don't.
whole film.
anyway. That was a real truck. They rigged the back end of the trailer with air compressor tanks, and you hit a button at the right time, and it lifts the truck up from the back end and completely flips it over.
See, that's why I hate the over reliance on CGI. And Christopher Nolan, I am convinced Christopher Nolan is the next Spielberg in that he makes big budget films that are really, really good and look great and will stand and will continue to look great long after the technology has evolved past it because the over reliance on CGI in Hollywood is not usually based on. It started out as we can't do this any other way. Then it became, well, it's cheaper and easier if we do it with CGI, but it doesn't look as good. So I really like that Christopher Nolan has that thing where he's like, yeah, it would be easier to do a CGI truck flip and it's going to be really hard and take a lot of creativity, but you watch the actual truck flip and it looks so much better that it's worth it.
Yes.
Like you've seen Inception, I'm assuming, correct?
Yeah, a couple of times. Yeah.
Yeah, the Nolan scene that I always tell people about is the spinning room scene from Inception where they're fighting and gravity keeps switching. He could have done that with CGI. What he did was he built an actual spinning room and put everybody on wires and stuck the camera to one part of the room. So even though the room's actually spinning, it doesn't look like it's spinning. It just looks like the actors and they're actually in the spinning set going, and gravity is really shifting on them, and it looks so much better because of that. I mean, if that had been done with CGI, I don't think anybody would have been talking about that sequence. That it's the same with a lot of the scenes.
It's
in
amazing
this
how
movie.
much more you can get done, and how much more believable it is if you just spend the extra money.
Yeah, I think Nolan's gonna save Hollywood. I think he's gonna keep other directors from over relying on CGI too much. I mean, I get it. If you want to do something like Transformers, use a ton of CGI. You're not really going to be able to do that with practical effects. But if you're doing something that's more of an action street level based movies, which is what Batman should always be, then use practical effects. It looks way better.
Yeah.
And speaking of practical effects, brings me to my third scene is the demolition of the hospital.
Yeah,
That was not fake, and that was a real building that they really blew up. A demolition team went in there, rigged up the building, and Heath Ledger really did stand out in the parking lot and detonate it.
See, I heard him pressing the button thing was an accident. He was supposed to press the button and it was supposed to go off, and he
Yes,
just
and
didn't.
That's how good Heath Ledger was the button really was supposed to detonate and it didn't, and he just went along with it, and it made for a better scene.
Yeah, it
He
totally
went along
made the
with it,
scene.
and he played it perfectly. But that was a real detonator that was supposed to go off with the push of the button. It didn't. He improvised, and it made for one of the best scenes in all of movies.
Well, and a lot has been made of this, but it's not something you hear in a normal conversation. The thing that I really appreciated about The Dark Knight was I watched it and I was like, oh my God, did they just make a allegory for living in a post 9/11 world and terrorism and surveillance starring Batman? Like that movie so much more captured what it's like to live in a post 9/11 environment than most serious movies where people don't wear capes. Um, Even adding the cell phone thing, I've heard that made fun of by other people because they thought it was a little on the nose. I liked it, like the whole surveillance aspect.
The one when Lucius Fox
Yeah,
brings
where
up
the sonar on
Mhm.
everybody's phones.
And that's correlating to
Well, and then he
the-
blows up the computer because
Well, yeah, but
No
even
one should
how
have
Bruce
that.
Wayne was like, "This is wrong.
Yeah.
You're tapping into every single person's phone." People believe that's what the government's doing now in real life.
well, they are doing it. let's be real.
Yeah, but
Maybe not as much since
That's
Snowden.
what I'm trying to
but-
say. It's not
it's not the exact, but they were able to take a comic book and make it much more believable that this could really happen. as far as the stories that go along with it and how they were able to take events and, yeah, tie them into real life tragedies.
Okay, so I know you're a Nolan fan, and I'm huge into him. So two-part question. A, do you think The Dark Knight is his best movie? Because it's kind of hard to debate what's his best film. And B, if so, do you think he will ever make anything better than that?
I think Inception, if you understand Inception, which I don't, I think there's so much more to it than what you'll get out of it the first 20 times you see it.
Mhm.
And I think just the depth of meaning in that movie makes that his best film. Is it my favorite film? No, that's why we have this list.
I think Inception's out there. I'm gonna go old school. I think his first film, like his second film, the one that got him notoriety, Memento, is his best one, just because he did it on a shoestring budget and it completely inverted the idea of sequencing in films. I mean, telling a story in reverse and then having an actual story reason. He only has a 15-minute memory span as to why you're doing that instead of just doing it for no reason because it's cool. But I agree with you, Inception, because the real brilliance of it, which he kind of explained himself, was it's a hack. He said, I wanted to make this great action movie, but the hard thing in an action movie is you come up with all these set pieces that are seemingly disjointed, and you need to find a way to make them all work. And he had the brilliant idea of, well, what if it was just all in a dream?
And I think Inception is one of the only movies that I can think of where the credits roll up and your only thought is, I didn't understand any of that movie, but it makes you want to go back and rewatch it 10 more times.
See,
And you still don't understand what it
I'm
means.
gonna sound like I'm gonna sound like a pretentious jerk here, but I actually I know it. I know a lot of people found it hard to follow. I actually walked out of Inception and understood everything that was going on. It was just I was blown away by how well it was executed. I mean, the ending, I loved it. Like that was a hard ending to do. A lot of directors would not have had the guts to do it, and it was the right ending. I hate it when directors do cop out endings, and I gave him so much praise for that because I was like, that was the right ending, even though a lot of people are going to be a little turned off by it because it goes in line with what the point of the story was.
Yeah. Well, obviously we have different opinions on what the best Christopher Nolan movie is, but luckily for us, this is not a list of the best movies. It's our favorites, and so
If I had to go favorite,
my number 4 movie of all time is The Dark Knight. So Darius is not here. His number 4 movie is Up.
Okay, so we just talked about one of the most popular films of all time that everyone's seen. So we're gonna make a hard right here for my number 4.
And we'll talk about Up next week when Darius is here.
Yeah,
but just to give you guys,
Darius also picked Up, another crowd pleaser that is also brilliant.
There's so much we can talk about that as well,
Yeah,
but we'll try and save it for next week.
We'll save it for next week.
But go ahead and introduce your number 4.
Okay. My movie is not necessarily recognized by a lot of mainstream moviegoers, but this is a movie that is considered to be one of the best foreign films of the last like 10, 20 years. It was nominated for a slew of Oscars. It's a film called City of God. It is a 3-hour subtitled movie. It is in Portuguese. Now, the director is actually British, but they did the whole thing in Portuguese because it takes place in a very poor region of Brazil, which is Rio de Janeiro, which is nicknamed the City of God, and it's this very long story that covers a couple of decades, and the point of the story is to show how this city devolved, because the City of God is famous for being this area that so devolved into gang culture that no one really lived past the age of 19. So you get to this point where there are no older people there. It's a bunch of children with guns. There are like 12-year-old, like you get recruited when you're 12, you die when you're 17. And it's just this, and the police did not want to touch this area, so they sort of just left it to its own devices. And the point of the story is to kind of try and explain how it got to that point over the course of those 3 hours. And the very loose story thread tying it all together is it's revolved around this child named Rocket who was born there, and he always had an interest in photography. And when he gets older, he gets out of the city of God because since he's from there, he's able to get all these amazing pictures that are then used by various news outlets to kind of try and bring attention to this problem, and it ends up being the saving grace that gets him out of there.
See, I thought the description on Netflix, and unless Netflix has the shortened version, I only watched a movie that was like 2 hours long.
It may be because I watched the director's cut, but
okay, that makes sense. Yes, director's cut adds a lot.
I watched the director's cut. I would recommend to people if you get a chance. This is one of the few films I would tell you watch the director's cut.
Anyway, so the description on Netflix was a boy named Rocket eludes a life of crime and drugs for his, to his love for photography. I was watching the movie and I didn't really feel like that's what the movie was about.
The loose thread tying everything together because he's explaining a lot of different characters.
He's the narrator, and I get it. So he's talking to his point of view because he walked away from it, and so he's got all the views from it. So he was able to tell the whole story. I thought it was more about the main kids that grew up in the gangs and then the rival gangs. I thought it was more about.
I think it's Z. The guy who was the gangster, who was the real bad guy in the movie.
I thought it was more about him than it really was about Rocket.
Yeah, that's what I like about the movie. The movie had this huge problem where they were like, you have this very disjointed story that's going to have a lot of people coming in and out of the story because you need to know about them to understand the real people we want to talk about. How do we tie that all together and have it seem like a cohesive narrative structure? So they very wisely made the story through the perspective of Rocket because he is the one thing that ties everything together.
And you talking about an emotional film?
Yes.
This one will get you because it's not adult.
It's about children with guns.
It's not adults in gangs because you see that you're like, okay, that's normal, that's whatever. But when you see kids and know this is a true story, and you have 7, 8-year-olds running around robbing stores and killing people, and then they're being murdered, and the wars, and everybody's dying, and everybody under the age of 16 in that town is dying from these gang wars. And
again, we would like to reiterate, it's not that they went after kids to join the gangs. It's that literally there was no one older. That's how
they grew up. They grew up
no one older
in the slums of Rio de Janeiro, and all they knew was a life of drugs and violence.
And this is a very important story. I don't want to play that down. That is part of the reason why this is such a good film. It's a very important and riveting story. That's not why I love this film. I love this film because it is on a technical level, it's very well made. There are more than a few shots and sequences that will stick with you. There's one scene in particular where a 10-year-old is holding a gun over another child and threatening to shoot him, that just the way it's shot, like nothing short, that scene is nothing short of iconic. Like that sticks with you. And like I said, this is a very disjointed, long film that is subtitled. Whenever I get friends that say I don't like foreign movies, I don't like subtitled movies, I always show them this one because this is the movie that I've found, other than maybe like Pan's Labyrinth, something that's a fantasy film that's based on visuals. People who don't like those kinds of movies are able to enjoy. I've never shown this to somebody and had them not be like, okay, I'm sorry, that was amazing, because it really holds your attention.
It does. And it's funny that you say that because one of my notes that I have here is that I'm not against foreign films with subtitles, and from a non-sophisticated moviegoer myself, I'll be honest, and when I first started watching the movie and it came up in subtitles, I immediately went to the languages to see if they had an English version. And they didn't, and I was like, crap, I gotta sit through 2 hours of subtitles.
Well, honestly, that part of the City of God, though, I actually had friends that are Portuguese that talked to me about it, or so they understand the language, and they were saying, I feel so bad for you that you don't speak Portuguese, because the subtitles are just a literal translation of what they're saying. There's so much slang in the movie, there's so much, the way that they say things.
And nothing against subtitles, because I even watched Narcos.
Yeah.
In 10 episodes of Narcos, half of that show, if not more than half of the show, was in subtitles, and I like this. I like that the entire movie was in Portuguese because it makes it more authentic. You're not gonna have everybody in Brazil speak English because that's not what they do. I wish that the narration had an English speak to it because the narration.
Let's be fair though. This movie has a lot of sequences where people are yelling at other people, where you want to hear them, the original actor doing that.
I'm fine
with the dialogue between the characters being Portuguese. I just wish that the narration was English, just because the narration. Yes, the narration.
If they had done Rocket's narration,
Exactly.
I actually think that might have worked because again, this is a British director.
The narration, you're not speaking to other people; you're speaking to the viewer.
Yeah.
And so
maybe
I
like
would've preferred
Narcos, where all the characters speak.
exactly.
But
Speak English.
I think
only thing with
I think that
subtitles
worked.
is now you have to read subtitles, remember what the subtitles said, and still follow along with the movie. Again, it's not really a big issue for me.
Fortunately for us, these are gang members, so their dialogue isn't very heavy. It's not like you're reading a paragraph like in some foreign films. It's basically like, "Oh, I'm here to kill you because you killed my friend."
Yeah.
Like it's very breezy.
But
I would be honest, it absolutely captured my attention and held me through the entire way. Subtitles are not.
Well, and the shots of Rio were gorgeous, like the beach sequences, and the movie does a very good job of being like, okay, we've done this for a while, let's switch this up and do this for a little while, and because of that, they're able to keep you interested.
I really enjoyed it. When I watch it again, probably not.
But you can understand why.
But I can understand why it's a top movie in somebody's list and why it is acclaimed for what it is. It really is a good movie, and it's definitely worth watching at least once.
I mean,
if
the
not
movie
more,
could
that's what
have
you're into.
fallen into the trap of just being, oh, we're about kids killing other kids. We're not going to try too hard on this because it's going to be an interesting movie just because of the concept. And it goes so beyond, like some of the love stories in this film, I actually think in their own right are very.
It makes you kind of like want to go into that place and just help these kids.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's a very effective movie. But even there is about 40 minutes of it that's not even about the gang stuff. It's just telling the life of these kids living there, and that was awesome. That's also like very riveting, and that's one of my favorite parts of the film.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps it up. Any last thoughts on City of God or Dark Knight or anything that we've talked about today?
Last thoughts, Oscar. I'm really hoping that by our next episode, I will have seen all 8 of the films. I've only got 4 to go, so
by next episode or by the Oscars?
I'm going to try by next episode. It will definitely be by the Oscars, but I have a little more time to do by the Oscars.
Yeah,
but
I
won't be able to watch all of them for next. I'm definitely going to watch them before the Oscars. Just
at some point, I would like to talk about. This is my official pick. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you,
the week before the Oscars.
To be perfectly honest with you, my pick is usually something that's never going to win. Like so far, my pick for Best Picture is Mad Max, but I know that's not going to win. I know 2 years ago I used to joke with people where they were like, "Oh, what do you think should have won Best Picture?" And I was like, "Well, if it had been me, I would have given Best Picture to Django Unchained, but they're not going to give Best Picture to a movie that says the N-word 200 times and isn't a completely serious drama like 12 Years a Slave." So there are just certain movies that are never going to win Best Picture, even though I think that they are actually better than the other ones for various reasons. I guess if I had one thing to say, if you have not seen Mad Max, it's on Redbox. You have no excuse not to see it. Go watch it now.
Okay, I will. I will make Mad Max my movie to watch by next week, and we can talk about that.
Oh, it's a.
I don't think I'll get to the movie theater because I don't think there's really anything out in theaters.
It's great.
Yeah. I do want to watch all 8. I did last year, but again, I watched 7 of the 8 in the 24 hours leading up.
Yeah, I didn't watch American Sniper last year either. I tried to watch American Sniper, and about 30 minutes into it, I totally got all the criticism of it being a rah, pro-America, anti-liberal like movie. It kind of irritated. It was like, this is really good, but this is trying to sell me something that I'm not buying. So I clocked out of American Sniper about 30 minutes in.
I really liked it. I enjoyed it. I know that they strayed away from the actual story, which bothered me. that it wasn't.
But all based on.
But
true
all
stories.
movies.
I
are.
mean, The Revenant is based on a true story, but in the true story, his kid didn't die. They just stole his stuff. They didn't even try and bury him alive. They stole his stuff.
All right, so because I'll definitely see Mad Max in theaters this week. You had 13 Hours, the Secret Soldiers of Benghazi.
I want to see that.
He told me watch Big Short. That's the next one on my
Big
list.
Short is still out.
Yeah, I really want to see that one.
Concussion. I heard it wasn't as good as it could have been. I know that. I heard that was the NFL had a big say in how that movie portrayed
what
the NFL.
I heard was movie, Will Smith, 2
Yes.
thumbs up.
Yes, Will Smith definitely had a
which is how I felt.
worthy performance.
Which is how I felt about Theory of Everything last year. Like, Theory of Everything was not a great movie, but Eddie Redmayne was so good in it that I recommended everybody you have to see it just for this performance. And the other actress.
We're talking about last year's Oscars. I think the most underrated film of all last year's nominees was Whiplash.
Yes, I agree with you completely.
I absolutely love that movie.
Whiplash, if I had been going from my personal opinions just based on my favorite, I would have said Whiplash should win. But they won for J.K. Simmons, which
so good.
He plays that character every time, but this time he did it to like the 100th degree, so totally deserved that Oscar. I agree with you completely, though. Whiplash was the one that was my favorite. The one that I wanted to win was Boyhood, simply because I think it's a very important movie, but I actually enjoyed Birdman a lot more than Boyhood, so I was okay with how it turned out. I think Birdman's a great film.
I think that wraps it up for us this week. So we're going to go. I know Darius wasn't here, so we will, again, talk about next year. He'll be his number 4 pick, along with the 3 of ours. Our number 3 picks next week.
Tune in next week to see what comes in at number 3. And so we are going to talk about Mad Max next week.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I'll watch Mad Max.
Okay, awesome.
I'll rank it this week, and I'll watch it.
I mean to rewatch that anyways. I need to go buy it on Blu-ray. Blu-ray.
Yeah. I haven't seen any of the other ones. Do I have to watch those?
No, that's the great thing about Mad Max. They understand this is a 30-year-old franchise. They did it in such a way.
I figured so. I just wasn't sure. I want to watch the original.
I mean, if you haven't, you can also do the same thing with The Road Warrior. Like, if you're just going to watch the original trilogy, the third one's awful. The first one's good if you understand that it was this little indie movie that was made for no money. But the only one you absolutely have to see is the second one, The Road Warrior, which Fury Road was, The Road Warrior got a lot of praise because it's this 30-minute car chase, and Frank Miller came back. The director had said, "What if we just did that the whole movie?" And there's this film is very much a companion piece to The Road Warrior, but I'll talk about that more next time. The great thing is you can just jump into Fury Road and you're fine. You don't have to know anything.
Okay, just double checking.
Yep.
So anyway, that does it for us. We're running out of time. We got a good hour show here.
Yep.
So with that said, have a good week, and we'll be back next Wednesday.
Bye.